For those of you watching the video version of Red House, I wanted to give you a heads up. I made a mistake and didn't start recording the video until a couple minutes into the conversation. I think it's about 8 or 10 minutes into the conversation that the video actually starts. My apologies on that, but the video does show up. It's just a little late. So I'm live at the Red House with Bryan Wehrkamp of Companion.
Yes.
Is that like your only project right now?
No. I mean it is my main project, but this year I've tried to just like follow I'm allowing myself to dive into a couple of holes that are not my own project, just for the fun of like pulling my brain away from Companion a little bit. So Kate Olivato and I kind of been just wrote a song.
Really?
But just producing it and having her voice be more in the front of things, and then which has been kind of nice for me because I've been able to like peel back. But that's just been like a fun project. We aren't putting any pressure on it at all. Just kind of like wanted to try writing and producing a song and not have my voice. And she had said she wanted to try writing and doing some singing. So, and then let's see, I can't even think of the other pieces. I mean, Tim, my drummer, Tim, he's got a project called Hyperkill, and I'm not a major proponent in it, but when it comes to what he's doing, like, I don't know, have you seen or heard any of his?
I've seen some of his solo stuff or whatever. Is that the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah. Where he like, it took us so long to figure out how to do this, but essentially he's like playing melodic things with his drum hits. So not only is he playing the drum beats, but he's got triggers attached to his snares and his tom, or his snare, his tom, his kick drum. And he also uses like different beat pads. So, and each one of those kind of does a different thing. So he's like playing chord progressions with the foot changes, and like switching things in Ableton. And so that's like another project, but it's a different project dimensionally speaking, because I'm not playing anything. I'm just kind of helping him problem solve.
Oh, like on a sort of tech side?
Tech side, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty exciting, man. And like, I've also noticed like a couple of other people, it does feel like within the last 2 years, the music community, it seems like it's almost universal that people are thinking of it in a more social way, in a less like jealous, less tribalistic way or something. Like, this is my territory and I'm trying to defeat everybody. It feels like there's a lot of people, a lot of like friendships that are overlapping within music now that I think is like super fucking exciting.
Yeah. I mean, I think that when we all start whatever project it is that we start, it always starts with that mindset, but it's the capitalistic, like individualistic culture that we live in, where eventually it starts to feel like it's me against everybody else, even if that wasn't your intention, or that isn't your intention, or anybody else's. It just kind of seems like it always ends up being that. So in the last couple of years, it does feel like we're moving away from that, and that could be like a natural resistance to, or change to, like the situation. The fact that we were all cooped up for a significant chunk of time, not able to be out and about with one another. It gave us an appreciation for one another, maybe. I don't know.
I wonder too, because it's really interesting. Like, I guess, I don't know. For me, it feels like, some of the story that holds together what it is in my head, that is like how I think about approaching music, is weakened or something. And now I do think I value community in a different way. And like, do you know Timothy Roberts?
Yeah. Drummer?
Yeah.
What's his company that he...
Reverie.
Yeah, his stuff is so cool.
Very cool.
If I was a drummer and had some extra cash in the bank, I would own a whole kit from him, because he makes great stuff.
He really does. That's my my long-term goal for my next drum kit, is to get one of his, because it's so cool. But I mean, he started this thing at Public House, the weekly, and people are going there on Monday nights and playing music, and it's a
Really?
jam kind of like organized by him and like sponsored by Reverie.
That's really cool.
It's
I didn't
very
know about
cool.
this.
Yeah, I mean it's
Yeah, yeah.
been. I think tomorrow will be like the third time it's ever happened. So
Oh, okay.
it's brand
Cool.
new.
Yeah, that's awesome.
If you want to come, you should come.
I mean, I definitely do. I've never been a jam person, like not because I don't want to, but because maybe I tell myself I can't, and that's what like is the block from like keeping me from being able to do it. But I just have a lot of appreciation for and a little bit of envy towards people who can just like step in and just adapt. I don't know, musically speaking, that I'm like advanced enough at any instrument that I play to be able to like just sit down and start or like jump in on something that is going to change directions. My brain, like, I don't know, maybe that's just like a little type A, but just needing to know where we're going is something that, like, I guess that's the foundation that I started when I started playing music. So
Yeah.
doing something, but I love and I love sitting and watching people do that kind of thing though. So
Yeah. I mean, I mean you're a songwriter too. We're both kind of songwriters that create
yeah,
total songs and
Yeah.
can kind of orchestrate them through and through and play
Right.
multiple parts and stuff. And I think that's a different skill set than being a player. And I have been a player before, and I think I used to be a more of a sort of I used to be comfortable jamming on drums and stuff because that was my first instrument, and
Yeah.
so that's the instrument that's like exclusively I'm just a player kind of in that role.
Yeah.
In that role, I feel a little bit more confident in jumping into things like that. But I'm with you. I mean, when it comes to the other role, playing guitar and singing and stuff, it's not an in the moment thing. It's been planned for like years. It's
yeah,
been like
for
a
sure.
skill that's developed over
Yeah.
a very long period of time. So it's not the same thing as jamming, but a cool thing about his jam though is that you can send them a song, and it's almost like a musician live workshop thing, I think is what he was
Oh.
telling me. So you can send him a song and say, here's 2 or 3 songs that if you and your trio want to do this, I could jump up with you and we can like work through it. And there just happens to be an audience there. But
That's
what
super
he's doing, what I'm interested in doing, what a couple of people are interested in doing is kind of like saying, fuck the idea of this being for the purpose of an audience. Let's fuck with this on a level of this is musicians working with musicians, and let's
Yeah.
like workshop stuff together and just like vibe on our love for music.
Yeah.
So
I totally just presumed that it was like a jam thing and immediately jumped to that, but that sounds awesome.
I mean, it kind of is a jam thing, but it's just that option is there too.
Yeah.
I went last week, and I think the manager of Public House was there, and he's like a R&B singer / rapper, and I think they just laid
What?
something down, and he like started. I think he like freestyle rapped and sang just like whatever came to his
Wow,
mind,
I
and
didn't
it
know
was
that.
fucking awesome. I think you'd really get a kick out of it. If you're not doing anything, I'm going tomorrow, and we could tag team it.
I will look at my
Look at your availability.
my plans this week. I have a the guy that I started working with, his name is Zach Golden. I met him randomly. This is diving straight into companion stuff, but
Yeah.
he's coming to town Thursday through Tuesday this coming week, and we haven't even known each other that long. I think I first reached out to him in August, and like this synergy is just wild. Like he feels like the kind of person that I don't know, you meet him and instantly you're like, yeah, we if we lived in the same place, we'd be like hanging out all the time doing this kind of thing anyways. So he's coming down, so I might be able to be there tomorrow, but more than likely I've got to keep preparing because I'm just kind of getting all of the songs that are kind of in pieces and at various places, and he and I are just going to spend 4 days just like bringing them to the finish line and probably starting some new ones and whatnot. So
Yeah, very
pretty
cool.
excited about that.
Well, I mean, that's a good transition to some other stuff we can talk about. Like, I guess, well, I'll give you an option here. You want to talk about the past, or you want to talk about the present?
Ooh. I think we could start with the past.
We can start with the past.
Yeah,
Let's
and
do it.
move our way towards
let's lay a little groundwork.
So, yeah, groundwork is always good for a story.
I met you in the shape that you're in, doing companion and kind of this. I see what the vision is, and I see like there's all kinds of stuff that I think we're going to talk about in a second. But what happened prior to companion? Like, what was your intro? Not. I want to avoid being too biographical. I'm not being,
For sure. Yeah.
That I assume you started playing music at some point.
Yeah.
So.
yeah, I did. And you and I have had the super deep conversation, so we can save that and kind of just paint the brush stroke that leads to right now.
Sure.
Which is to say that I've always had like a tendency for music. I guess my mom always tells a story about how before I was tall enough to like reach the piano, or like even to climb up on the bench to play the piano, I would like run into the piano room all the time and just like play the notes and be like enamored by the sounds. And so she was like, well, I knew you were going to be a musician. And whether that's true or, I mean, mother's intuition probably is true. But
Hold on. Camera isn't running.
Well, we gotta fire that bad boy up.
Oh my God. I walked over here and everything. Now we're running.
Nice.
So
we're on.
I've got that audio.
Yeah.
What I can do is I can grab it still just to get us started and then carry us to that point, and then it'll start now.
Hi.
The video. Anyway, whatever.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's jump back in, man.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the piano.
Yeah. So my mom from an early age was like, you're like, I think he's gonna be musical. So I was put in piano lessons, and then I took piano lessons specifically, or once I realized that I wanted to play drums, I immediately was like, well, they require 2 years of piano lessons, so that's when I started doing that. And then my mom made me stay playing piano against my will. And I hated it, but then played in the band, marching band, and kind of always fumbled around on the piano, but mostly just like got sheet music to songs that I liked, like Edwin McCain's "I'll Be." I learned that. stuff like that, you know, those middle school bops.
Yeah.
But then honestly, I think the tipping point, as weird as it is to say, the tipping point for when I decided like I want to sing and play was in college, and the motivation behind that was for sure to like be that guy at the party who's playing the guitar and singing, which is such a bro thing. But if you knew me back then, I was a total bro. So I was learning country music and playing some AC/DC and Led Zeppelin on, you know, guitar riffs and all of the things that just make me kind of cringe now.
I can't picture you doing a country song.
Yeah. I was a big fan of Kenny Chesney back then, and I still am. I think he's pretty phenomenal. But yeah, so learned guitar, kind of taught myself. It was weird. I learned guitar, and then I took the chord shapes on guitar when I figured I wanted to start writing my own songs. I took them note by note and figured out what those were on the piano. And then I figured that that part that unlocks when you realize that everything's in a progression.
Yeah.
And just like learn the progressions on guitar, then transferred those to like piano notes, and then just kind of got used to doing that in different keys. And then that's sort of how I did that. And then in college, my sister passed away, and we talked about that. We'll keep that light, but she took her life, and that changed my perspective on where I was at. Kind of, that's the point where it like turned everything on its head. And I realized like the insignificance of like the pursuit for stability by comparison to the pursuit of things that I'm passionate about while I'm alive. Because in that moment I was experiencing, like, you know, you're working through like, okay, well now that person's not here anymore. And that, you know, led to questions about faith. And it was just like an intersection where I needed an outlet anyways, or I needed lots of therapy. And I did get that anyways, but the outlet was music. And then that was where I just decided like, okay, well, I'm going to be a junior in college. I guess I was a junior at that time. And I was sitting in genetics class, and I went immediately from there and went to my administration office and was like, I'm going to change everything, because I was on track for med school.
Yeah.
And then from that point forward, I started a band, and that was called Avian Sunrise. And we had some like, I think we had such a good following because all four of us were in college and different groups in college. And so it's just like I feel like got really lucky starting there, because our first show was like a sold out 200 person show. And then the next one was like 400 college kids in a little convention center thing. And so it was really cool. Gave me a taste of like what it might be like to have a band that is touring or traveling or whatever. And I've still never done that to this day. But yeah, then rebranded to Valley Hill. This was all in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. My wife and I got married in 2016, moved out here. And then that was where I like left that stuff behind and was like, I'm just going to start over again.
Yeah.
And so that's where I decided to I was sitting alone on Wake Forest campus. My wife was a graduate hall director while she was getting her master's degree. So we had an apartment there, and I didn't know anybody and I didn't have a job at the time. And so I just was waking up, making music by myself on campus all day. And that's where I was like, this music is like a companion to me. I'm very much alone right now. So that's why I named it that.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's a
there
really,
you go. That I said I didn't want it to be too biographical, but I just gave you the whole suite.
You really did. Yeah, that was a great, succinct, like whole picture.
I was analyzing it as I was saying it, and I was like, "You need to speed up this brush stroke."
No, that was great. Yeah, I mean, when you talked about, God, there's so just not already knowing you. There's so many things that already stand out about. Like, I know that we could have great conversations about 10 of these different things.
Yeah.
The first thing that hit me when you were talking was like I felt something from it. The problem of stability versus passion, you know, and it sounds like you really, I mean, you were on, I saw a post you made, I don't know, a few months ago about like kind of reflecting on leaving the whole medical path and going into music. I imagine that was, and what it's connected to, the inspiration for all that. I mean, I imagine that takes some real commitment, I guess, to stay the course toward your passion.
Yeah. I think I've had these moments a lot in the last couple of years, because as I've been doing this longer, so that was 13 years ago now that I made that decision, and I still don't feel like I'm where I want to be in my music career. Even just, you know, there's like the lofty dreams and goals of like, I would love to play arenas and stadiums. That would be like, not for the sake of the glory of it, but just that connection. And that's why I make the music. Like, I want to share it with as many people as possible. And it's like a conversation, and it's my favorite way to talk to people, because I'm socially kind of a little bit awkward anyways. So it's just nice to do that. But I you know, even those goals, like, I'm not even saying that in this situation. Like, stability for me as a musician is less than that. But I've been reflecting more often on just like, I don't know, just what that looks like for me in the current state. And I think back then I had more assurity in myself and was more reckless. And it's funny to analyze your waveforms over the years, because back then I cared a lot less what people thought, and I was making decisions for self. Like, I know it sounds selfish, but like, I made that decision while I was in genetics class, and I remember looking at the board and and he was talking about, I have no fucking clue what he was talking about, because I was just like thinking about the songs that I wanted to write. And I remember looking up there, and I had that definitive moment of like, nope, this isn't it. And that's why I like walked straight. I didn't even ask my parents. There was no like, I should probably mull this over. It was just a decision in that moment. I went straight to the admin office and was like, I need to switch this around. And I finished my degree with things I wanted to take. So like the way college should be, I think. So I also in making a rash decision, I also made a very productive decision, which laid the groundwork for being able to carry a tune. Because when I started my band, I I had these songs written, and there is a friend of mine who I attribute kind of a pretty pivotal moment for me. Like, I attribute him to that. His name's Jesse Becker, and he's like full blown country artist voice. I mean, his voice is incredible. He was also like star basketball player at this Division I college. So it was a weird juxtaposition, because I was just this like nobody, and he and I were hanging out all the time, like playing music and jamming. But I started writing these songs, and he, at one point, as I was like, singing them and playing them, I remember thinking like, I don't think I should be the one singing these songs. My voice is terrible. And so I asked him if he wanted to be the lead singer of Avian Sunrise, and he was like, man, these are your stories. These aren't my stories to tell. These are your songs, and I think you should sing them. And so I did. And if you look up Avian Sunrise and you look up the Your Broken Fall EP, you can hear the truest transformation of voice, because those recordings are bad. Like, I could barely carry a tune.
Yeah.
And yet I was so convinced and sure of myself, more so than I am now, I think, which is kind of a sad reality. Like, you think you'd have more wisdom and assurance the more, not even necessarily more successes you find, but also like what you learn from your failures. But I think it's, as an artist, there's tendency to dwell on the failures and to let them facilitate your perception of yourself, which is just not right. It's not the right way to go about it.
I think there can be wisdom in insecurity too.
For sure.
It is tough. I mean, I relate to that so specifically. When I was 19, I just didn't give a fuck, and I left school and said, I'm just going to pursue art. And that was never really shaky for me until I loosened it. And it wasn't age. It was like, there's so many, podcasting can be so hard, because like all my thoughts, they're not always totally present. I've been thinking about some of this shit a lot for the last 2 weeks. So a lot of it just pours out of my head as soon as we start talking. Here lately, I've been reflecting a lot on what it was like when I first stepped away from the focus I used to have about like, all I do is pursue being an artist. And when I stepped away from that and got like a full-time job.
Yeah.
And there was good and bad to it. Like, one, it bred what you're talking about. It bred this thing that was like, I gave myself permission to lose focus in a way. On the other hand, though, I've been having all these other strange thoughts about like, I think the wisdom that's in there sometimes is like, I think this sounds a little surprising for a musician to say, I guess, but sometimes as musicians, as much as we value what we do, and as much as the rest of the world values music, as important as it is, here lately I've been remembering that when I first started working full-time for Aperture, honest to God, it was one of the first times in my life that I remember a morning where I was driving to work and thought to myself, wow, other people will be affected if my life ends. Like, not just on a familial level or a friendship level, but like I'm contributing something to an effort that's aside from me, that's like not me.
Yeah.
And it will, other people are actually relying on me for the first time ever.
Yeah.
That, I think, and now as I've shifted over to like different career options and stuff, I'm doing a different job now, whatever.
Yeah.
I still find myself in this tug of war. Like, how do I know what matters? Does it matter to like pursue what I want, or does it matter to do this thing where we contribute to the large picture of society and be like working with other people and be able to go home and say, I didn't just contribute to me and what I want, I contributed to like the overall picture of life or whatever.
It is like it's reassuring to hear you say. I'm serious. Like I think of the insecurities that I hold, that might be one of the biggest ones that I'm like kind of uncovering. I was talking to a good friend of mine who is going through a rough patch right now, and my way of relating to it and sharing like 'Cause, I mean, my number of emotional breakdowns have increased in the last 3 or 4 years, which to someone who's outside of me and the things I'm doing, or outside of me and perceiving the things that I'm doing, it kind of seems like, well, 3 years ago, Companion would never headline a show, and now Companion has headlined something in Winston-Salem, which was at Wise Man, and it's like, your listener count's higher than it was 3 years ago. There's so many things that suggest that it's going like this, but my mental has seemed, it seems like it's been on decline, and one of the biggest reasons that I've uncovered is that there's not a lot of there's a struggle when considering the importance of the things we're doing. Like, I think there's a rub there because those offerings are things that we're pulling out of ourselves and contributing, but oftentimes we don't see it like that. It kind of seems like it's a self, because it comes from us. It seems like it's not really benefiting people the same way as working a job for someone whose business is, whatever, is dependent on you. But I think there's also value in understanding that, like, you're either working for somebody else's dream or you're working for yours, like that whole saying. And it's like, I don't know, like, not to even dive too far into faith. It doesn't really matter what you believe in, but if you believe that you have a purpose, or you just have a passion, like, sharing that passion is, like, I think that's one of the biggest forms of expression. It's most important. And so it's hard to hold both of those at the same time. And my biggest cause of breakdown more recently is just that, like, with this age that we live in, we see what's going on around the world at our fingertips all the time.
Yeah.
And it can make what we are doing seem really insignificant. Like, if I'm writing so the most recent song I'm writing, I'm using, like, an allegory of, like, a person who's come home late at night and, is inebriated significantly, and is having, like, reflective thoughts and also not wanting to go to bed. And so there's a lyric in there about, I wish you'd come over, play video games. Like, I have 2 controllers. I miss you more when I'm not sober, that kind of thing. And I think I've had thoughts as I was writing it. It's like these words and this thing is like, it's almost like when you're sick and you have to throw up, you can't not, like, it's going to come out. And so, like, that's how I've felt about songwriting since the beginning. And a lot of times when I'm, like, sitting down at the piano, start playing, and I'll hum a melody or sing a phrase of nonsense, and it will cause my eyes to tear up. And it's always like it's a euphoric response. I don't know how to, like, explain it. It's just like, you call it divine, whatever, but that's important. Like, it seems like it's serving only myself. So it's a hard thing to justify when you consider, like, all the bad things that are happening in the world. Like, how's a song about being super drunk and missing somebody really that relevant? But I think it is, though, because aside from the grand, terrible, like, the big bad things that are happening, there are day-to-day problems that people are struggling with all the time, and we all are craving the connection and knowing we're not alone in those things. So I think it's all important. It's just hard to be convinced of that sometimes.
I feel that 100%. I mean, what's today? 2 days 2 days ago, I released a song that I wrote kind of when quarantine period started. I had put it on YouTube originally, and then people liked it, and somebody messaged me like, when are you going to actually release this? And so, like, a month or so ago, I got it. I remixed it and got it mastered and stuff, and I released it on streaming platforms this week, and I posted it, and I was just like, I feel so embarrassed to post it, because, like, when I look around at everything, at least, I guess you don't see it as much on certain things like Instagram. People just seem to constantly always be doing their thing, and it's always just like, here's my day to day. But sharing it on Facebook and stuff, where people really kind of vocalize their engagement with one another more, feels weird because Ukraine is happening. Like
Yeah.
all this shit is happening, and it's like, what does it say about me right now
Yeah.
if what I think is important to do is like release a song that I wrote about COVID, especially since we're all trying to get past COVID already. Like,
Yeah.
what do I do? And it's, again, it's insecurity. It's like, it's better. It
Yeah.
seems better for me if I think of my life as just like taking action instead of letting myself get bogged down by all these things.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. I mean, I released the song. I wrote what I I put it out there and let it be shared with the world. But
Yeah.
those thoughts still muddy up my head that just make me feel like, what does it all mean? Like, how
Yeah.
do you justify anything
Yeah.
anymore?
Yeah. And also, like, what is our end motivation, which can be like a real debilitating thought if you're not careful. But like,
Yeah.
ultimately, like, I've always said, I'm not really going through my life considering the importance of what legacy I'll leave. Like, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that. But when I zoom out and I'm like, I'm 34, and like so much can change in like a week's time, let alone, 5 years or whatever. Like, at the end of all of this, looking at my 13-year music career, I've spent a lot of time being really stressed, riding the waves of like, things are happening, like it seems like things are good, and then facing rejection, and then you're at the bottom again, and just the emotional roller coaster. I'm sure to the people in my immediate circle, especially my wife, in the last 5 years that we've been married, like, she's had to endure a lot of roller coaster.
Yeah.
And like, I feel bad about that. And when I consider legacy at the end of my life, I don't want to look back and be like, damn, like, there were several decades that I spent sad and stressed and depressed. And I know that I do know also, being as old as I am now, that even in the worst relationships I've ever had that went terribly wrong, our minds tend to blot out the bad and kind of glorify or shed light on the goodness of it. So I guess I'm not spending my days stressing about it, because that would just add to the stress I'm already feeling. But I don't think a lot about legacy stuff, and yet I want to make a difference while I'm here. I think when I set out to do music, it was more one-dimensional. It was like in the wake of my sister taking her life. And so my first album and then the album that followed it all just were around like hope.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like variations of hope with some relationship stuff peppered in there. But most all of it had like a hopeful undertone, and had a lot of faith infused in it.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older, that has become, I mean, that the faith boat has been rocked so hard, in like a good way. Like, I think there were a lot of things that I latched to right away that just have to look at my Facebook memories and be like, oh, like,
Yeah.
why did I say that?
Those are the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also they were informing me of where I am now and where I was going and things like that. And they were pivotal in one sense, but when it comes to like trying to figure out what the importance of my works and my ability to make a difference while I'm here, I just, my prayers used to be, please make this work, or like, give me the tools, or show me how, or expand this, like, whatever. Nowadays, it might have some of that, but it's also, if this is not what I'm supposed to be doing, take the passion away from, or like redirect it, or do something. Like, I don't want to waste my time doing this if it's not the greater difference that I can make. Because like, we live in a pretty fucked up world.
Yeah.
And you don't have to look very far to see the injustice and all of that stuff. And we live in a weird time where like, if you're not vocal about it, it's presumed that you don't care. And that's just such bullshit. Like, I don't know. I feel like why the hell in all of the history of war were there musicians on the battlefield?
Mm.
Like, what? I don't know. This is just a question. I don't actually know. I'm not a historian. I don't know. But like, music has always been tied to the upswings and has been pivotal in the downswings. And I just think it's hard to rationalize what we're doing on a daily basis, but I do think it's important, even if I'm not fully convinced.
Also interesting to note that there's a history of when different authoritarians decide to take over or like express their authority in certain communities. Art is usually one of the first things that they get control of in some way or another. They either, I mean, no matter, they always gain enough control that they only allow art to serve their overall view of how the world or how their country or whatever is supposed to be.
Yeah, because art is a freedom of expression, and so it's a great way to connect. I don't know. I mean, it's just like art moves people in ways that I don't know that sometimes are just like you can't explain it, and so it does make sense that
art expresses, I think, the true power of what individuals are. You know, it's like this is what people are capable of, motherfucker.
Yeah,
and it's kind of badass.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I wanted to ask you something, man. Like what you were just talking about, kind of that hopefulness and stuff. I think if I think people ought to go look at everything you've been doing for the last few years and just kind of like get the overview, because there's a lot of musicians in town, many of whom don't have any sort of like highly produced, lot of effort creations like what I think you have in your portfolio, if you want to call it that or whatever. A lot of I mean, what I'm saying is a lot of really great looking videos. You've obviously gone to some like very serious places artistically and creatively that you've just like devoted your focus to. In addition to all that, there is a lot of like hopefulness and a lot of what I guess I would call like positivity or something within it, that it's interesting knowing you and knowing that like this started with such a great tragedy.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by the relationship of the tragedy, the hopefulness or the positivity that you're kind of accessing or harnessing or something.
Yeah.
And then also like it also does relate to your faith in some kind of way. And whether it's total faith is a private thing. If you want to talk about that, you're more than welcome to without me challenging it. But still, that whole picture of something so hard producing something so positive, I think is interesting.
Yeah. Well, that means a lot. I think in terms of what my goal has been with Companion, I mean, it definitely started out like most of this stuff carried that hopeful undertone and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting that when you look at it as like one big picture, that you glean that from it. I'm really glad that that's the case, because more recently, a lot of days I don't feel as hopeful. But I think that's a byproduct of the times that we're living in. It's been a really weird 3 years. And so sometimes that has been challenged. And I think that that's going to be reflected in the writing I've been doing more recently. But yeah, I mean, I guess I wasn't explicitly ever told this, but I do remember my dad saying, just with like, even when I started doing music, that was the point where he actually said this, but like my whole life, I kind of become obsessed with things and, or have found things that I'm really interested in, and I just get consumed by them. And, I don't think that's not unique, but my dad has always said, one thing about you is that anything you put your mind to, you don't give up on it very easily. And will do whatever you can to like become the best that you can be at it, which is, all that sounds so generic, but it is funny, like the hobbies and the things that I became obsessed with, like I go all in and always have. And so I think that is reflected in my music career. But before it was music, it was snowboarding. And then I landed on my neck in Colorado and was like, yo, I'm too young to be paralyzed. That I don't want that. So I stopped doing that kind of stuff. But before that, it was wakeboarding, and before that it was rollerblading, and before, you know what I mean? Like, most of it was like action based, but here, like, even when I was younger, it was like obsession with skeletons. Then it was obsession with bugs. Then it was sharks and rays. Then it was, and then it was wrestling, WWF. And then it was football, and everything that I jumped into, I can see it wasn't just like, oh, this is fun. It's like, this is all I want to do.
Yeah.
and that's just how I've always been. So when I set my mind to music, I think it was supported by the real world adulthood decision of like, well, I'm not going to do medicine, so this is the real deal now, so it needs to be taken seriously. And so it's always been like, how am I going to do this? And there's been this like stressor of wanting to make it work because it's what I want to do. Yeah. Which can have a negative impact on it for sure if you put too much pressure. But in terms of like how I've been doing things with Companion, I just don't stop because it's what I'm obsessed with. And even in like the lowest points where I'm like, all of this feels pointless, nobody really cares about it. I have faced lots of rejection over the years of things that were like this close, and then ultimately not to use that song or not to get with that agent or whatever. None of that stuff has ever driven me to a point of being like, oh, you know what? Maybe I'm just going to stop for a while. Yeah. Yeah. So that, I think, is reflected in the things that I'm producing, whether it's the music videos. Like, if I have a vision, I want it to be the best that it can possibly be. So, and I've just been really, really, really lucky here in Winston, and especially like, I mean, getting a job at Camino was paramount because that's such a hub for musicians anyways. But it's like just getting to meet someone like Tim, my drummer. He's one of my best friends, and he left me the best voicemail. I still have it. It was after he had discovered that I actually make music, because I don't lead with that. I'm not very confident in who I am, and I don't ever want to be that guy that's like, you should check out my band. So he didn't know that I was, and he hit me up, and just that synergy. I don't know how to explain it. It's like the things that I've been able to do in this city, like working with the super talented people that I know here. I've learned so much. Like, every person along the path since I set foot in Winston-Salem have been like paramount to, whether it was like, I mean, when I jumped into the music scene, Matt Alvato, Kate, and Devin, like they took me like under their wing and like brought me into, like, I was able to help them with some things, and then they wanted me to play keys and guitar in their group, and then I got to record with them in the studio at Stephen Price's and got to meet him, and like that was one of my first experiences where I was like, whoa, I'm like a part of this music community out here. And I just felt like really accepted right away. And then I met Josh Dorsett taught me so much about recording and things that just like I know so much more now because of these people who've just like freely given to me since I've been out here. And that's been huge in like the process of getting to where I am with Companion. So in a sense, it started as a solo project, but it feels like a team effort, which is kind of what Companion is to me now. I'm less concerned about it looking like a band or a solo project. I just want to acknowledge the people that are a part of it and and make the best tunes
Yeah.
we can. So
Yeah. So, well, you're embarking on something in the now, aren't you? Like, what is, I guess, like, you've, well, the music that you've made so far, have you been, I guess I've seen Companion look two different ways over the past like 5 years or something.
yeah.
I think I have an idea of who's in it now and everything, but I guess what does that whole creative process look like, and what are you embarking on right now with it? Like, what are you in the process of doing?
So this last year was very informative for me to answer this question is easier now than it was 6 months ago. I think because I started music and at the very jump off point, it wasn't like I was going to coffee shops doing solo things. It was like, I can't do this alone. I've carried that with me. As soon as I started a band, it's been very hard for me to think about making music without believing that I need a band. And yet over the years, I've just noticed that like the things that I have in my head, and not always in a bad way. Like I'm not saying that this to say that I don't enjoy the collaborative process, but especially when it comes to producers and, you know, band experiences where like everybody, it's just mutually understood that everybody will have a say in what happens in the song. Like the song isn't done until the guitarist writes his or her part for said song. And oftentimes I'm a 2 on the Enneagram, so I'm kind of like a people pleaser giver. So oftentimes I watched songs start one way and they would finish completely different than how I envisioned them. And I never loved them any less, but I was always like, that's not exactly what I had in mind. I just envision it being this like Bethel worship build. Like I actually just envisioned it being this with like a hip hop beat underneath it. Or something, you know what I mean? Like that's a pretty extreme example, but like
something
to that effect. And so over the last year, and this is a multifaceted answer to that question, but in terms of the creative side of things, where I'm at right now, I feel like this last year, I was very proud of the music and was also kind of in like a transitionary stage where I gave myself permission to not feel bad about inclusion of people in areas. Like I more so, and it was less about people, and it was more so like this thing is calling out for this, and this is what it needs. And I need to like pay attention to that without trying to consider how that might affect this person, or, you know, what I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I'm chasing the creative process now with an open mind, but also not a mind that's going to feel bad if it takes it a certain direction, which is to say like feel bad about Companion sounding maybe a touch like a hip hop track in a certain way. Like that's just what my mind wanted and what like the vision for the song was at this point. And that's kind of where it goes. And so I'm letting the songs come out more freely and chasing it that way. And I met, like, I think I mentioned this at the beginning of this podcast, but I started working with a guy named Zach Golden, who, once again, it was just one of those things. Like I heard a song randomly on a Spotify playlist called Switch by Amber Ryan. Song's called Switch, and it sounds nothing like a Companion song, but like I was enamored by the 808, the way the 808 line was different than any kind of 808 bass line I'd ever heard. There's these like weird glides in it, and I was like, this is so fucking cool. I need to know who did this. So then I looked up the song credits on Spotify and found Zach Golden, and then I searched him, listened to some of his stuff, and I was like, I'm sure this is going to be such a long shot, but I'm just going to message him and whatever. And to abbreviate the story, we hit it off, and we worked on one song together back at the beginning of October. And since then we've worked on six songs, and he's coming down this week to, I think I've got at least 10 to 15 in the queue of like varying degrees of not finished, but like worked on or progress. And so he and I are just gonna sit down and make the time and space to see where those songs go and how we can make them sound. I've never been more pleased with a body of work right now in all of the music that I've made, because it's like how I envision it sounding. And also just like everything feels like it has a thread. And I think Zach really helps with that. He's the first producer that I've worked with that hasn't like corralled stuff in a certain place, if that makes sense, based on his skill set or his whatever. Like I've worked with like a producer engineer who mostly did like alt rock. And so a lot of the songs that I made, this was like back in 2011, a lot of songs that we did ended up sounding like the music that he usually produces. Drier vocals, more distortion on things. And it's like, that wasn't what I was thinking. And it felt like it kind of put everything in a bubble. Whereas like this feels like I'm writing about all these things and I'm finding ways to be more vulnerable and honest with them. And also the musicality behind it, the production, all of it feels more like an honest extension, which is like, I'm just very happy with where things are at right now, moving that way.
I'm glad to hear that.
But yeah, and just in the process, giving myself permission to not try and put limitations on it or like corral it in any certain direction. Like that's one of the things I love about Tim and my other teammates too. I call them, I think they're more like a team. Like for me, and being a band would be like, you know, making sure everybody's face is in the photographs and stuff like that. I don't give a shit about that. And some people really do. And that's fine. But for me, I care more about the music, and this year especially, that's been my focus, is like I want to make more space and time for the music to be what it's supposed to be, without being like, oh, this is good, I really like this, but I got to get it to my guitarist so they could lay a guitar line down on it, and then it will get the stamp to be sent.
Yeah.
I'm just like less concerned with making sure that the orchestrations are always, X amount of instruments. Like Tim, my drummer, I just love him so much. Whenever I show him a song, like, I build the songs around, I produce all of the stuff in my studio. So sometimes I'll have made the drum beat and everything like that. And there've been so many songs where he's so honest about it. He's like, do I want to have a songwriter portion on this song? Like, fuck yeah, I do, because the song slaps, but also there's nothing that I would do that would add to this. And that's like such a mature thing, in my opinion, to be able to arrive at. And it makes me feel like, that honesty has made him and I even closer.
Yeah.
Because I know that he looks at it as a piece of art and not a product that he can have his hand on.
That's a very real thing. Yeah.
I think to anyone who's listening to this, it might sound like, this is my thing and I want it to be a certain way and whatever. And that's fair. That ultimately I am chasing these thoughts that I have in my head and trying to put them down in a way that is an honest extension of myself. That's why I started Companion. It was a solo project. I consider it kind of a team thing, but that vision is kind of, you have to have some sort of vision and motivation behind the things you do. And that's what it is for this. But it's also informed by like terrible band experiences, which I think anybody who's ever been in a band has, like, you're basically like forcing a family to happen,
Yeah.
and there's going to be problems. You're going to butt heads on things and whatever, but like Man, you want to talk about financially speaking? I have paid out more band members that have left in legal fees and things like that than I've ever made as a musician. And I'm the one that's spearheading the whole thing. Like since I started, I've never been like a just a player or a participant. I'm the writer and the one that has the vision and the front person and whatever. And yet I think I've always felt like I've been shorted in that way. So it's informed me for the present to make sure that I am careful about letting it get to that point.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a difficult balance to strike in all of what you're describing. I have never, this is why I've usually avoided having, I've never put a band name on any of my original creations. When I was younger, I played with a moniker, but that didn't last very long. So I've always used my name. My name has been the signature on it.
Such a badass name.
It's a
I think it is.
I like my name. And I remember the first time I ever went to Guitar Center, I was looking at recording gear and the guy was like, Tyler Nail. I told him my name and he was like, Tyler Nail, is that your real name or is that just your stage name? I was like, it was my real name. That's a badass name. And I was like, that's cool.
See, you knew.
if it could be a fake name, that's pretty cool. Yeah. But anyway, I've always kind of maintained that level of the albums that I put out are me, and I've had other people work on them, but I've never really given. It's weird because like in the recording world, I never really give that much authority to somebody else. It's always kind of like I try to maintain the final say, but I also try to acknowledge that like when I've worked with other people as a musician, I find it frustrating when, say, somebody maybe has ideas about what I should do as a drummer that limit what I think of as like wisdom about what might be a good contribution, and maybe like they don't not that they I don't think I felt like they should like totally yield to my judgment in that department, but I think like sometimes I felt like, man, I'm here to be creative, and the way like you're instructing me on what to do with an instrument that you don't play kind of thing, and that doesn't feel creative to me. It feels like you're trying to make me be a proxy for your imagination, and that isn't really involving me. You could just program a computer to do this and that would suffice, kind of thing. So I've tried to look at other players like that too, and like I've got some good people that play with me, and if I looked at them and thought that I needed to micromanage what they contribute, I would feel like a real jackass because they're better at their instruments than I am, you know. But at the same time, I mean, I think some people give off the impression that they're like some kind of asshole because they like are so committed to their idea of their vision. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's so hard to be decisive about a vision, you know? It's so hard to even know what you're going for sometimes. And so when somebody like you, a songwriter, has, you know that there's that finish line in your mind that you're trying to get to, it's kind of a sacred thing, you know? It's a beautiful and sacred thing that it's worth protecting and striving to try to get to that place. It's good if you can pursue it. In my opinion, it's good if I feel good when I can pursue that without being totally like a tyrannical, controlling force that's like not willing to see other people's contributions. But you got to, I mean, that's the whole point of a vision anyway. You got to try to stay kind of true to it, you know? And I do think the maturity thing you were talking about, that's just some grown up shit. That's just like, that's putting the vision before the ego, which is kind of what you want. In that realm.
It's weird because when you vocalize it out loud, it can so easily sound like you're putting ego before vision, because like it's your vision, so it's what you want. True. So then it is driven by ego. But I do think that there's like very real magical thing that I guess I've had these emotional swings the last like couple of months, but I consider it all like a transitionary phase into like a better understanding, because like again, going back to, if you looked at my social media stuff the last year, I think we released 9 songs, 6 music videos, and like I was running ads all year. I was coming up with short ad clips to whatever. I was staying on top of TikTok and Reels and trying to understand the algorithms and stuff like that. And also all of that took like specific moments of focus, like weeks of time where it's like, I'm only going to devote my time to this, and this is what I'm doing. And then I would be like, at the beginning of the year, it was like songwriting. I was diving deep, and I would hit a stride and I would crank out like 3 or 4, maybe 5 songs that I'm like really excited about. But then my mind would immediately go into like, okay, well that's, we live in an era of releasing singles. So now it's time to like, let's button these up because we need to be on a consistent release schedule. So then it's like, okay, final production stuff, need to work more hours at places to have money to pay for mixing and mastering. So like, I essentially like was on the songwriting ship, hit a groove with it, and then just stepped the fuck off because I needed to jump into, okay, now it's time to finish the songs up and begin the marketing and dreaming up music videos. So then it's like storyboarding music videos and creating ads and learning unique ways to do that kind of stuff. And I would do that for a couple of months and neglect song. I wouldn't write a single song. And then it's like, all right, cool. Well, now we want to play live. And maybe I think I had like last year, I found a few different like agents, like booking agents, management, stuff like that. I was like, I think these songs are like, we're at a place where now I've got the songs, not songwriting at the moment because I've got the songs, got the marketing tools and the ads and the creatives that are built around that. Now it's time to like put them in front of people and see if they're good enough. And so the only way to do that is, reaching out via email or YouTube or whatever, posting ads. And then it's also playing live. So then it's, okay, well now I need to like rebuild the live system, do all the programming. And that takes months of time to get up and running. So by the time I've done those 4 phases, we're talking like 6 to 8 months since the last time I wrote a song. Jesus. And it's just, you know what I mean? Like, because I'm spearheading this thing and I could outsource, but I've done these things in the past, and it just seems like in the current state that we live in, like the pace at which you release things needs to be quicker. So I can't wait, 2 months for a spot to open up for someone to mix something. I need to find something sooner and get it. And I need to be like, it just seemed like I was go, but in the process I was leaving behind things that like at the core of who I am, it's what I care about the most, which I'll just go back to the songwriting thing. Like the last couple of weeks, or I guess couple of months, I felt I got nothing to say, or like I'd sit down at the piano and I'm like, I can't think of any fresh melodies. These hands only know, like these chords. It doesn't matter what progression or what key I'm in. It just, my hands always land on these because I haven't spent any time learning anything new in these departments. And my brain is just like, all I've been doing is anything but writing music. And so it's like working out for the first time in 6 months. I'm so sore and so out of shape, out of practice.
Yeah.
And I hate that so much. I think I've realized that more than anything, like I love the songwriting and producing side of it so much that like I don't want to be so encumbered by all of these other things. And so like it's been a really informative couple of months just learning that I want to chase these ideas. I want to give myself space to not, like I've turned down 4 or 5 live shows already this year just because I don't want to shift gears there yet. And I just want to make more time for this thing that like I think should always be like, I think my foundation should be that I'm always writing because I want to, because I love it. And then everything else can stack how it should, so long as it doesn't split the pie too many ways, I guess.
Man, hearing you talk through that, it reveals to me how some major differences, I think, between us, and probably great examples of how maybe our social media numbers and different things, and like quality of our video existences and stuff are so different. Because I almost refuse to do anything ever. Period. Uh, no, I write songs. I try to get better at recording them. But for me, it was always about like pretty much performance, writing and performance first.
Yeah.
And then like recording was also important and making good albums. But all the marketing stuff, absolutely refused to really do it as serious. Like I don't know what it is, but it's like I sometimes refuse to be able to get down to the nitty gritty in the way that some people are so good at. And it doesn't quite make sense because I like editing video and I like making videos and stuff, but I think it's like sometimes I fail to involve other people or something. I don't quite know how to explain it, but the that dedication, I think, is what I was talking about with like if people look at your body of work and what you've done, it's like so clear that it's been executed the way you just explained. Like it's been planned. It's been like you really put a lot of thought and preparation and effort into this, and it's like at a scale that not a lot of other local musicians can really say they have also done. And it sounds like I guess I would venture to say that work ethic, I would imagine it makes sense why your alternative path was the medical field and mine was probably like gas station clerk. Because I would, sounds like you really will fucking take it all the way to the end and be very detailed.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's just like kind of how I was raised, just kind of just trying to make sure that if I say I'm going to do something, I follow through on it. I guess that was a value that I would probably learn, but I guess maybe I was informed when I decided to start snowboarding. I think I started learning when I was in like 5th grade, and I realized like if I put in the time, I get better at this, and I just kept wanting to get better and better and better. And so I think that's like one of the I guess that's probably the first thing that I can think of where I'm like, my obsessed mindset just kind of like pulls me in that direction. But I do think over the years, and especially pertaining to becoming the musician that I am now, which is to say that like when I started, I didn't know how to produce things. I barely knew how to songwrite, and didn't know how to record. So it was reliance on a band to help curate the vision. It was reliance on a recording artist and engineer and mixer to capture it. And then it was MySpace. Like, yeah. or whatever, Pure Volume. You can pay for like a little ad on Pure Volume or whatever. But like I didn't know any of the things that I know now, and I don't know. I have a vision and a desire to share this on a global level, and so I just want to I'll just do whatever I need to do, and sometimes it kind of kills me in the process. Like doing all of that stuff, I don't enjoy the social media stuff the way that some people do. There are moments where I really do, the point of connection moments. I love it, but I think I also get hung up on the process of making videos and things like that. I think mostly because I wonder, like, are people going to care? Like, what if people don't care? Or like, what, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, the way that I see it in most cases is like, if you're standing in a circle of people, nobody ever wants to be the person that like offers something in a conversation and is just looked over. You know what I mean? Like, I've been in those situations a lot where I kind of just feel like I'm existing in a space. I'm not really thriving or not really contributing in any major way. And if I try, it seems like it's not really that important. And that is a huge fear of mine. And so that's why it's like, it's a love-hate thing for sure. And why I'm happier now than I've been in quite a while, releasing myself of the expectation of like, I haven't put a song out since fall, and that's the longest stretch in several years But that's because like rather than seeing the numbers and everything going downhill and like my belief going downhill in like my abilities and stuff like that, I'm trying to see it as like a slingshot being pulled back. In that like I'm loading that chamber, I'm like getting everything ready and ignoring that talking that's like, if you want people to care, you need to participate.
Mm-hmm.
You need to feed the algorithm or whatever. And I don't want to sound like cynical about it either, because I think that there are valid arguments on both sides of getting paid 0.004 cents per stream.
Yeah.
There are valid arguments, like Spotify has made more artists discoverable than the hard copy album era by a long shot, I think. And TikTok has done the same thing. However, there are less bands, less songs that I think are withstanding the test of time right now.
Yes.
But also I question if that's like what our parents thought as we, as their lives evolved and as the music industry evolved and things changed, went from whatever vinyls to CDs. I don't know. I don't know the correlation there, but I sometimes wonder if we think those things because we're fearful that like we're not going to be able to participate or keep up.
It's a good question. It's a good question. It's also a question about whether or not, if it's a question of whether or not music if it's reasonable to expect music to be profitable for people.
Yeah.
Like we're not entitled to that. It's like, it's just something that you don't have to do it. Like I don't have to do it. I don't have to I don't have to think of music as like a career. I still get to make music and I could still put it out on platforms. And if it's true, the things that we say sometimes about wanting to share it with people, then maybe we, like me, maybe I shouldn't work. Like that's what I tell myself, where I land often when I think through this is like, if it's about sharing it with people, then I shouldn't really worry so much about the whole financial side of it. 'Cause if it's about sharing it with people, I can do that whether I have a different job or not. And really having a different job doesn't keep me from sharing it with people. So,
Right.
I think for me, honestly, the truth of it for the last 10 years has been that I wanted to make like a lot of money off of it. I wanted to like have a sustainable life that was super prosperous by making music, because that's what like a shit ton of other people do. Not the majority of musicians, but like a lot of musicians do. A lot of the musicians that I've looked up to, like that's the life that they were able to lead.
Yeah.
And so of course I wanted that for myself. But I think, I would, if that isn't an option, and if we continue down this path and music becomes instead more like a semi-affordable thing that we can do to share music and at least like have followings and, hopefully go play live. I mean, that's not something everybody does. And if this whole thing supports us going out to play live and maybe making some money that way, that's all still worth doing as far as I'm concerned. It's not like if I can't be a millionaire, then I don't want to do it.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. And I think to that, there's like a subconscious or sub layer that is like, there is validation in the success of that, that like you are good enough to be doing that.
Right.
And if you aren't, then you aren't good enough. Those things are hard for me to separate because I have the same goals as you. I say that I want to play, I would love to play in arenas and like orchestrate an hour and a half long show that is an experience. Like that sounds like a dream come true for me. But I would be so happy if I could live off of music and tour and hit small clubs. And that's the biggest I ever got. I have gotten a taste of, and live music is also one of my favorite things. Because studio stuff is fun for the creation process and just the I say euphoric experience, because it's like that's the closest I feel to the divine in my whole life is the creation process, because most of the time I look back and I'm like, how the fuck did I do that? Almost all of the time it feels that way. And yeah, I think that will never change. But live music is like, there's a synergy and a connection that you're seeing you're seeing the conversation happen in real time.
Yeah.
And for me, it's way less about the adoration and glory that comes with that. There's validation in both of those things, that like I am doing what I'm supposed to be doing. That'd be the only thing that, like, that only aspect for me. But I care more about like the conversation piece and the excitement of that. But all of that's to say that like, I'm trying to remember what I was even talking about, the sub layer underneath success. And like, you're right. We can always make music, and we don't have to put any expectation for financial. And in a lot of ways, that's the best way to create, I think, is to pull away as many of the expectations going into it as possible, so that the thing can like breathe and grow and change and become whatever it's supposed to be, without like, oh, you need to sound this way, or oh, it needs to production wise be this good, or it's not going to make us X amount of dollars, or it needs to be better than the thing we did last time, whatever that means.
I don't relate to that at all.
Like it, but yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's hard to separate self-worth from.
I mean, in other industries, you don't usually have to, like,
right.
I mean, I guess it depends if it's like nonprofit territory, that's one thing. But in a lot of industries, mainstream industries like this one is, and this is a multi-billion, but probably multi-billion-dollar industry in the country. And in a lot of industries, like if you're a drum manufacturer or whatever, the fact that you can afford to like keep doing it and sell these drums and make a profit that's the rules of the game. The rules of the game is profit. So you make more than it requires for you to produce the thing. Now that the thing about what has changed is that it used to cost a lot to produce music, and they made a lot, and they made the overall thing made a lot, but like there were a lot of people involved that were like taking parts of that. Now, I mean, like, look at ourselves. You and I both have recording setups at home that it can cost anywhere from $100 to $200, $100 to $200,000 to start your, recording setup at home. Yeah. You could sink as much money as you want, but really, you can go to Guitar Center. You can spend probably $150, $200 or something on your first little 2-channel interface and computer speakers, and get yourself going.
Yeah.
Then if you make $200 in the course of a year, you've made profit.
Yeah.
Well, $100 profit is not necessarily enough to live off of.
No, it sure isn't.
I guess the reason the game got so fucked up is because like now consuming music is so cheap and producing music is so cheap. Yeah. And so like that the whole thing that was built on producing those masses of money that allowed these guys to build the fucking careers that they have, those aren't in place anymore.
Right. Yeah. It is a different time. It's just it's all faster, and that is a hard thing to swim against when the current's pulling that way. Or even just to stand your ground, I guess. Like I have just kind of gone with it and been like, all right, cool. Well, if this is the pace, then I need to adapt and figure out how. And so that's why like learning marketing was like not on the docket of things to do in 2019. But I spent, I think it was like a 3-hour Google hangout with a guy named Anthony who started this company called Simple, marketing company, and he like showed me what a Facebook pixel was and how you could like use it to track and to market and then retarget the people who click on the things that you, and I'm like, this is how they do it. I had no idea. And I learned that, and then I started implementing ads, and the number of people around the world in all these different countries, from like Brazil, Chile, the UK, Russia, Thailand, Taiwan, Singapore, all of these places all over the world. I have fans of Companion because of this. And I remember the first few months of watching the ads do the work that they were doing. I was like, well, if this just keeps going like this, then like, okay, you crunch the numbers. You're like, okay, well, this many people, new followers this week, or this month, and every week it's this many more. And so you take that out 1 year from now, and then boom, you have 20,000 Instagram followers, and that'll be a nice, like, your stuff will show up on discovery page more likes equal whatever. I remember running the numbers in my head, but it never fucking works that way. It never as soon as it felt like it was gaining traction, Apple did an update, like an iOS update, and it was like, it did something where like the default was to not allow ads that didn't show up on your interests or something like that. It just defaulted to whatever. It changed the whole game. So I was like, cool, glad I learned that. Now it's got to be all different. And that's just kind of how it's been. So I do think it's a love-hate thing. But my focus this year is on the joy that goes into the creation of all of it, and less about what that outcome might look like.
That's good, man.
That's my goal. That's my motive, or my goal. Yeah. I'm going to try.
You mentioned something to me, or I guess like last week when we were getting ready for this, when we were talking about like, I guess, and I think you hinted on this already in some of what you said, like social media, like making small creations, and I suppose like the marketing efforts that go with that rather than making long ones. And you also mentioned something about how your maybe relationship with social media in general is like changing. And that is, I think, another pattern I'm seeing. The more I talk to people, the more I see that like we're having in many ways, having very similar experiences with some major exceptions. But one of those is like people I think are starting to wonder, what is this thing that social media is doing in my life? How is it fucking with me? What do I need to do differently about it? And you said some shit the other day that I thought sounded pretty interesting. Like, what has changed about your perspective with social media?
I think my relationship with it is to understand that I'm not going to understand it. And the freedom that comes with just it's just so easy. You no matter what, and I'm assuming most artists feel this way. Like, I don't think there's a lot of artists out there that put something out that they truly don't give a shit about. We care deeply about the things that we create, like whether you're a painter or a musician or, a podcast host or whatever. Like I just started, it's just a real quick little aside. Some friends of mine that I grew up with in high school had this idea to start a podcast, and like they reached out to me and were like, hey, will you help produce this? What gear do we need? And I told them, and seeing them chase it, and now we just this last week released the first episode. I'm seeing myself. It's like a mirror reflection back. Their excitement, their reckless abandonment towards doing this, like it's all they're thinking about. They're thinking about how can it expand, how can it grow, whatever. And I'm just like, I know also that they're gonna hit the same snags. Like, they released the first episode and they're like, well, this is about the response that I expected. I tried not to have too high of hopes, but we only had like 33 downloads or something like that. And I was like, it's got to start somewhere. Yeah. And I just remember, and as defeating as that is and will always be, it's just that we put expectations on things, and you can't not. It's very hard not to put expectations on things. But my relationship with social media, I'm going to participate, but I also am going to try and treat it more like a relationship with boundaries. Like, I think it's just I have to, like, I have never been the kind of person. I've tried a few times to like ease into the idea of just sharing more, because people, I think the reality with social media and TikTok totally highlights this, is like there was a veneer on things for like most of the 2010s. And then like shit got real, and I think TikTok's blown up, and musicians on TikTok have blown up because most of it's just like a phone recording. Most of it's just really lower quality video. You know, I don't ever see any ads that are like professional grade video on there, unless it's like a Ryan Reynolds movie that's coming out, like some whatever little ad for that. But it's like most people, it's just raw and it feels real. And I think that like when I do pop onto social media, I'm going to try to care less about like what was the engagement on that and whatever, and just keep sharing the things that I'm trying to pull out of myself and create conversation with, and understand that like it's all growing, and most of it's waveforms anyways. Like I think if I look at the trajectory of my career, it's really easy to feel like it's not going anywhere in the slumps, but it's always been like this. You know what I mean? It's the reality of it. So I'm trying to put less expectation on that kind of thing, but
I am too. I'm trying to just like, I don't know. I get so fucking bogged down by it. I'm trying to just not give a shit, but that's also a difficult thing. I guess it depends on the platform. Like, do you use like Facebook still at all?
Yeah. Well, interesting thing about Facebook, my companion Facebook page is currently, it exists, but my Facebook was hacked, and in the process of that happening, I was removed as an admin of my own page. But before that happened, I removed these 2 accounts that had added themselves as admins. And at the point that I did that, I think Facebook was like, something fishy's happening here. And so they booted me. And so currently my companion page it's existing, but there's no owner. But I own the business account that was running all the ads, and I had to like create a case around it and like talk to someone on the phone who helped me get the ad account aspect back. But it's just this pending thing. So to answer your question, in the current state of things, I'm not really marketing on Facebook, but I do post most of the things to my personal account on Facebook.
Yeah.
Because there's generally good engagement, and most of it's from like my immediate circle back home, like family and friends from growing up and former jobs I had and things like that.
Yeah, that's the thing. Facebook is more like location relevant. And if you have an event, I mean, I hardly promote events at all on Instagram or whatever, because in some cases, in some cities, there's going to be somebody following me, so I will post something. But, you know, really, I think as far as people paying attention, I think that's still like kind of the Facebook world of things, socially speaking, unless you have a really big following. So, you know, on those, like on some of the more like the platforms that belong to different generations than like the younger ones, that's like, there's one way of engaging on that's like lame. And then there's like ways of engaging on these other platforms that are lame. There's like the lame factor about whether or not you're really in the culture correctly.
Yeah.
And then there's the like pandering factor of like like observing the culture and trying to feed into it to capitalize off of it. Yeah. It's just like all this shit is so frustrating to me because I don't know. I don't know. It just doesn't come natural to me to know. I none of it, given that I'm like curating some kind of, it feels like I'm curating some kind of like lens into my life. None of it feels like it's legit to me.
Well, and the irony of that I think is the hardest part to realize and enact is that like most oftentimes when we're observing, we immediately see the ways that it's working for other people, and we either haven't tried it or are just discovering it in that moment. And usually that informs us of like, okay, well, this is how it's done, so I'm going to do it that way. But like the people that we look up to the most oftentimes, and the ones that remain like, I want to do it the way that this person did it. It's usually because this person just did it differently and it worked.
Yeah.
And that part is really hard because that requires you to believe that if you just did it your own way, that it might work and that you don't have to follow other people, which I'm like, this is like a preaching to the choir scenario, because if I actually did this, maybe I would be in a different scenario than I am right now. But like, chasing, I think there are benefits. You have to hold it loosely in both hands. There are benefits to like not always trying to reinvent the process. But there's also great benefits to when you don't know what to do, to be like, all right, cool, that's a good starting point. But I think ultimately, and just to go back to that question of like, what am I going to do different? It's trying to figure out a way that is sustainable and healthy and me. And that's hard because I don't know exactly what that looks like with the current state of things. I haven't really been paying attention to like how things are being promoted and stuff like that. But like, I don't know. I think there is value in stepping up to the plate, even when it doesn't feel like it's working. And that was a lot of last year, I think, for me. Like, even though it does look like things were working, most of the time it felt like it wasn't. But I just kept going, and I fully intend to do that the rest of my life until either the passion is taken from me, or like I wake up one day and it's just gone, the drive to do it, or I die.
Yeah.
So I just think that I'll always look at it as like a problem to solve, but also like my way of expression in the world. And I want to get to the core of who I am more so now than ever before. And I think that is coming out in the songs that I'm writing, and will continue to, like, I'll continue to be peeling back the layers until, and each time there's like a vulnerability and an honesty that maybe is a little off-putting. Like, maybe I don't want to say that because I don't know how that's going to be perceived, or maybe that's whatever. Like, yeah, there's questioning and judgment in all of that happens of self. But I think, yeah, in terms of like how to go about it, I think the people who are finding sustainable ways are often the ones that are just being the most honest.
I think it's true. In some, well, I don't think it's true about social media, though I do, in a different way, I do think that's true.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pathology on social media that like people can capitalize off of. So I could like get on there and just pander to people's like stupid ideas.
Yeah.
And that would give me some level of success from some people, but
Yeah.
that wouldn't be success that really, I don't think, satisfies me.
Mm-hmm.
But as you were talking about like people that we might look up to, I was thinking about it like, what was the difference? I mean, and I don't know who comes to mind for you, but for me, people who came to mind is people who made those decisions within the arts that they participated in.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking of like Frank Sinatra and Johnny Cash, or two that came to mind. I guess if Levon Helm is a hero. Father John might be a good example of this that we could maybe think about, because he definitely, Jesus, what the hell? He definitely, I should have silenced my phone. He has played with a lot of different ways to engage with social media that I think burnt him out in different ways. But within his art, it was always his art that it seems to always be within his art that he's kind of pushing boundaries and stuff. But when we think of artists that their heyday was prior to social media, I don't know. I know that all of them engaged in marketing. I know that the companies that put out their music marketed their music, but like Johnny Cash's job was like, exhaust yourself within your vision and live your life. And he like went through a bunch of different stages doing that. And pretty much, I mean, his career, pretty much ended until Rick Rubin. I mean, he was playing like small clubs and felt washed up, I think, till Rick Rubin found him and was like, we're going to make the best albums you've ever made. And Johnny Cash didn't take that seriously. I remember when Hurt came out by Johnny Cash, whatever, I didn't see it on a billboard.
Yeah.
I didn't see it in a magazine. Check out Johnny Cash's new album.
Right.
I saw a music video, and I fuck with music videos. Saw it. I don't remember where the first time I did, but I think it was on CMT actually.
Yeah.
So it's not that isn't marketing. That's obviously a marketing technique, but it was a work of art.
Yeah.
But it drew me into the rest of the Rick Rubin albums, which stand alone. Like it's the art that makes it's the albums that are the product. I think what burdens me about so much of this stuff is like I put out an LP last year. No one knows about it. No one heard it.
Yeah.
I put out a single this week. No one will hear it. It's just how it is for me. And part of the reason is because I feel like in a lot of ways it's like our jobs now are just marketing. It's not creation at all. It's not art at all. It's just marketing.
Well, I think we see and or have had a taste of how that can change things for us. And that's enough to be like, all right, cool. That's how the game is played now.
Yeah. Which I don't love, man. I mean, I guess I haven't figured it out the right way. And so I haven't done what you've done. I haven't talked to like marketing companies to figure out how to get people to my music.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, the ultimate goal for all this stuff. But, I worry, I think that my new art form would become like Instagram instead of like getting people from Instagram to the music.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hard not to think about our position in the scarcity mindset that like there's only a limited number of ways that these things can work. There's only a limited number of people that are going to hear this if I don't do it this way. It's just always about like not enough. And rather than thinking about like the abundance that can come from, I mean, there are some artists, I say this, I think this is a good example in just the context of like how much can change even long after the fact. You can see this in like classical compositions, like, oh my gosh, I was going to use a music one, but Van Gogh is a great example. Like Van Gogh was popular. He wasn't even that popular while he was alive. It was like way after. Now they've got these pop-up. My wife and I went to one in Charlotte. It's like a whole experience of like his art in motion on all these walls and stuff.
How was that, by the way?
It was really cool. I mean, I like it because I didn't know that much about Van Gogh, and so I was like learning in the process, and seeing his art actually like move was kind of cool. I'd imagine if you were tripping on something, it would have been really cool. But I mean, the band Toto. I feel like they're probably more popular now than they were back when they were in their heyday, like in the 80s and 90s, because of Africa. Because Africa, and so like in my friend groups in South Dakota and out here, that song is like, it just came out of nowhere. And I don't know how or why or what. Like for me, it was a jukebox in Nashville. Like heard it and I was super wasted, and some friends of mine like they were like bent over, like swaying their arms, dancing on an empty dance floor. And that's what I remember first being like, oh yeah, this song is awesome. What song was that? I had to look it up. I just remember like Bless the Rains is what I like Googled. I was like, oh, what's this song? But like, we don't know. I use that just to say that, like, you know what you said, and I'm not trying to be like the positive encourager here, but like, whatever. I think there's like, we also live in an era of like instant gratification. I don't think that's going to change, but like good art will always withstand the test of time. And the things that you put out, if there are no listeners, that's not to say that there won't be listeners later. Like someone could just randomly use that song on some like unsolicited whatever, like use it without your permission, could just blow it up on YouTube with a video that they use for some impactful commercial. Yeah. And then you get into a lawsuit and you win because it's your song, because you created it, and then you're set up for life. And now you've got this huge fan base. I don't know. It could go so many different ways. You don't know. But what I'm saying about the difference between scarcity and abundance, like it's hard to hold the mindset of like there is abundance to be had in any of these situations, so I'm just going to do it and see what happens. Yeah. And that's also like, it's a hard mindset to keep, but that's something that like is an underlying pull for me, is just like anything could happen. Like I released Crop Top last summer, and I still believe that like that song will probably withstand the test of time because I don't think crop tops are ever going away. But like that song landed on a playlist like last month, and it wasn't on there very long, but while it was on there, I was getting like multiple thousand plays a day, and I was
Really?
like, this is wild. In my mind and in the current way the industry works, that song's old news. That has had its moment, and now it's done. And that's like, I mean, that's kind of how it's been since I started making music, even before social media was such a big thing. It's just like you have this big push behind an album, and then once you've pushed it and posted about it a few times, we assume, I don't want to be annoying about it. If you haven't heard it by now or you don't care to listen, then it has done what it's supposed to do, and we're just moving on.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the case, because like I'm discovering songs that were written several years ago, and I love them by artists I didn't know existed.
I think that what you just said is very important, because I apply these rules often, these cynically motivated rules, to myself that I don't apply to other artists. And there's tons of times that I can like get on some roll, listening to some shit on Spotify, discover all sorts of songs that I add to playlists that I'm just like, I'm not basing my impression of the song on like how new it is or who it's by or anything. I am just having an honest kind of reaction to the song in that moment, and like grabbing it if I want it, and making it a part of my life. And I'm assuming on the flip side that that's kind of not a possibility on the artist side of things for me or whatever. I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that, because like I do sometimes, and I don't know, I express negativity, I think, with just like feeling so overwhelmed with like how to feel like I'm being productive as an artist these days, because I don't always feel like I know how. And I need to improve my perspective on some of these things, because I don't want to sound like this complaining asshole that's just like no one cares about my album from last year or whatever. That's not where I want to be. It's just like I don't know what else to do sometimes anymore. If I'm gonna refuse to like lean totally into using social media to its full potential, but also like want people to hear the music, it's kind of like you can't have it both ways, probably.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately in that process, and it might just, I think it will just always take a while, because both sides of it are always changing, but it's just, it's trying to figure out what is a healthy, sustainable way to hold both of those things. Which even right now, as I say that, like, I don't think I'm necessarily striking a balance, because I'm not really caring about social media, but also just like seeing it sort of meta, like if every interaction is a conversation, there's also like breaks in the larger conversation that are important, like space and time to contemplate and time to whatever. That's part of the waveform. And so like I'm trying not to feel like I'm negatively impacting my career by just like stepping back for a second and not worrying about sharing an update or sharing little snippets of the songs. Like sometimes I think there's a give and take with that. Like, you know, some songs blow up on TikTok because someone shares like a 1 minute thing, and people just take to it, and they do like an open verse challenge, and then the song blows up before it's even released. That can happen. And so you think, well, you know, maybe if I post little snippets of my stuff, one of them will take or whatever. But at the same time, like there's a part of me that, I don't know, just like hearing somebody say something profound in a conversation, sometimes they don't say anything until that moment that they say the profound thing, and it makes it that much more profound, because they took the time to just observe and take in and inform themselves of how to say it, and then they say it, and then it's just like, whoa, that's brilliant. And I'm not like, in that sense, I guess like I'm trying to think about the music that I'm making in light of that, in light of the fact that like I just need to give it its time to like incubate and let these ideas percolate and figure out how to bring the songs to a place where I feel really good about them. And then I'm going to share them. And who knows, maybe the time while I was away, even if it was going against building up my fan base and playing along with the algorithm, and it might go to a smaller audience, it might be more impactful because I spent less time sharing snippets of it that would give people an indication of what was coming. Or God, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. I guess like a likened scenario is like, sometimes it's most fun to go into a movie without seeing the preview.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't even know what's going to happen. Some of my favorite movies were that.
Yeah.
And also it's really fun to know little bits and pieces like the Marvel movies. I don't know why I love them, but I follow some random pages that like are always looking for little tidbits or like posting like, ooh, I think Hugh Jackman might be in the next, Doctor Strange. And it's like, that's cool to me. Cause then I'm like, oh my God, that makes me even more excited about seeing the movie. But it could also be just as exciting not seeing any of that. It could be even more impactful and mind blowing if I had no notion that was even going to happen. So there's a goodness in both of those things, and I don't think there's wrong in either approach. So like if you waited a year and didn't post anything, when you post again, might not reach that many people because you weren't feeding the algorithm, but the people that it does reach might be like, holy shit, that's where he's been.
Yeah.
And that can be really impactful. So
I like that. Yeah, I think I need to just lean into being comfortable doing what I want to, like kind of what you were just talking about, like accepting that I don't want to do the thing in the way that a lot of people do it. Mm-hmm. So just like accepting that and doing it less and being fine with that and not resenting the idea that I feel like this pressure to do it the way everybody else is or else, you know, like, cause it's not really an or else thing.
Yeah. It's just it's trying to find the health and the happiness in the process, because it's hard to create authentically when in the back of your mind you're also you're having the dialogue of like, I need to keep up.
Yeah.
Again, it just goes back to scarcity. Like if I don't produce, it's not going to happen, and that's not true. At least I don't think it is. And so I still believe that the best is coming with companion stuff. I'm really excited about the next release of things. The music video that we shot in January in South Dakota is like one of the most intense music videos, and like required a lot of myself and my best friend who lives back in South Dakota. Like he and I both are not actors by trade, but we like went full in on this one. And who knows? Who even knows if it will translate? And like the song is one of the songs I'm most proud of to date of all the music I've written. And who knows how people are going to receive it? But all I know is that I had the most fun writing that song, and that's something I'm going to hold on to tighter than how it's received.
That's the biggest takeaway that I'm getting from this conversation, that I hope, because I think this episode is a bit of an episode for musicians who are also like in the whole social media dilemma or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the big takeaway, is like we have to get back in touch now or at some point with the creative process and the creative achievement itself being more important than the reaction from audiences. I think we have a real responsibility for our mental health and shit to like be willing to step away from the idea of reception, just like what you were just talking about, and just like find solace and comfort and meaning in the creative process itself and the vision, like trying to pursue that vision.
Yeah, I mean, a friend told me when my sister was going through being an inpatient at behavioral health, and I was like breaking my schedule by like working a full-time job and then going there and spending 4 hours in the evening every day for like a month. I was just like completely, it was like wrecking me because I was lacking sleep and emotionally drained. And I think he said something, he and I were talking about it, and I just told him, I was like, I feel like I have nothing to give And he just said, if you're no good for yourself, you're no good for anybody else. And I just remember it's short and sweet. And I was like, okay, that's a universal truth. Like if you don't take time to be okay with you first and the things that you're doing inward, then like, how can you really be like to the fullest degree of help to the people around you? And so it's recognizing the areas like that we judge more harshly or like put unnecessary expectation on, and then trying to move through them in a way that like leaves us wanting to come back and do it more. And that's where I guess I'm trying to arrive as a musician, is like, I love so many aspects of the whole thing, live, writing, recording, all of it I love, but I want to make sure that I'm holding loosely all of those things, and just trying to make sure that I retain that love and passion in an authentic way, without the motivation of like putting emphasis on how it's received, I guess. Is what I'm getting at. But I think that doesn't necessarily mean that like I will forever post less, because I've now had this revelation that, you know, I need to care more about the creative process and care less about social media. I'll probably find a new balance this coming year once I've got all these songs in the tank, but I'm going to make sure that I keep songwriting, and you know what I mean? Like, rather than like starting, going full in, and then stopping and going full into something else. And, you know, train car, I'm just going to try and see it as like a full picture of balance, hopefully.
100%, man.
Try.
Yeah.
Keyword.
I'm going to try to, I've been playing with just like we were getting toward this earlier. Like, I'm trying to get to where I just like kind of don't think so much about posting things and trying to engage with people, and feeling like it has to generate a certain outcome, or it has to express a certain kind of meaning. I'm trying to like just look at it as another realm of creativity, you know, just be creative and just enjoy being connected to people, and not think of it as like strategic all the time. That's my goal, I think, for where I'm at right now with it.
Yeah. It's I know the podcast episode that you had with a guy named Josh. I don't even know his last name.
Josh Shelton.
But yeah, I only know him through TikTok.
Yeah.
But I've seen some things that he posts, and I think he has a valid point in like, and I'm seeing it more in people who are feeding the content wheel, is like, why are you posting what you're posting? Are you doing it for yourself, or are you doing it for others? And I think that can also be a double-edged sword. Like, I agree with that, because I think if you think about it in terms of like, if I'm having a conversation with you, if the whole conversation happens and I never asked you once about yourself, that's not a fucking conversation. I'm just talking at you. So I think there's a balance that needs to be struck, but also as a 2 on the Enneagram scale, like I sometimes give to the point of depletion without any expectation of kickback, and it can be really hard. Like you can give so much that it feels like you're not caring. There's no self-care that's happening to strike a balance of that, especially in terms of social media. So it can be a good thing, but again, it's just about what works best for you.
Yeah.
And for someone like Josh, I admire. I mean, he's growing his fan base on there consistently because he's posting things that are helpful for other people.
Yeah.
And he's addressing issues with content creation that, I mean, we do it at the core of all of us. Nothing that we do, I don't think, is altruistic. We always have a motivation that benefits us.
Yeah.
And that's not going to change, I don't think. It's very hard to do anything without understanding where the kickback comes, the purpose in it. But I do think it's important to know that there's a balance with how much you give and how much you get back.
Yeah,
and
I
motivation
agree.
behind that. So
I agree completely, man. We're gonna wind this down, but well, fuck. I wish we've been going for almost 2 hours, so I
Nice.
guess we shouldn't go any further. But like you brought up the Enneagram thing, and I'd love to pick your brain about that, and also really like I love talking religion with people, and your experience with religion, I think it's very like we got to talk about that once before, and I'd love to
Yeah.
like revisit that, especially now on this side of that issue for me because I'm like, less. I don't think I've dealt with the trauma that I felt like I was carrying around from religion, and
Yeah.
I'd love to just talk to you about that at some point and
Yeah.
like learn what how you see the world. But I guess for this one we'll call it a day.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I appreciate I appreciate all your insight and like the thoroughness that you approach all this shit with, and I hope we'll get some chances for me to like keep learning some shit from you because you
Same.
clearly are doing some shit at a serious scale.
I appreciate that. Thank you for having me and like having this conversation. Like even before we hit the record button and whatever, it's just like we were due for a good long catch up, and I feel like there are a lot of other conversational pieces that we didn't even touch on that I think could be future episodes or just you and I talking in person. But either way, it's yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely love to have future episodes. That's what every time I finish a conversation with somebody, it just leaves me ready for more.
Yeah.
I'm just like, fuck, there's so much that we haven't covered yet.
Yeah.
So, and as creative people in town, it's just like, that's why it matters to me. It's just like everybody's got so many ideas and so many interesting, weird perspectives that I just want to like be affected by at this stage of my life. So, let's just plan to pick it right back up. Like,
Sounds good to me.
As soon as we can.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Game.
that's Bryan, everybody. Thank you for coming over, man.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for having me.